Mr. Speaker, I am sometimes surprised by the number of St. Lucians who watch and listen to budget debates. I am accosted by citizens, whether they are supportive of the government or the opposition, who engage me in discussion about the budget, or for that matter, specific policies announced by the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I would have thought that they were tired of us politicians, our utterings, and our antics. But that does not appear to be the case. On the contrary, there is palpable excitement when a budget debate is near. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there are those who want to listen and evaluate the presentations by the elected representatives, especially the rookies among us, those who have made it to Parliament for the first time. A significant number, however, look forward to the theater that accompany these debates. I guess we will have to wait to see whether any entertainment issues today. Mr. Speaker, I recall that when the decision was taken to televise debates and proceedings in the House, there was concern that interest in the proceedings in the House would wane. That may have happened to some extent, but it has been compensated for by a phenomenal increase in the number of people who view the proceedings on television, online, or otherwise. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, there is power in our words. I also hear the cynical among us. Those who hold us in contempt, ridicule, and sneer at our chosen career. At every opportunity, I reply that I believe and continue to believe that there is honor and dignity in politics. Among those who treat us with contempt, we hear the frequent charge that all politicians are the same, and their political parties are one and the same. Mem bret, mem poil, some say. Others put it a little more appetizingly, they are two peas in a pod, but it means the same thing. I do not agree with this characterization. I believe that while both parties subscribe to some common values and principles, there are real differences between the parties in ideology, philosophy, and policy outlook. True. I was shocked by some of the events which transpired between 2016 and 2021. But I comfort myself and I treat that period as an aberration. One of those things that happens in our constitutional passage as we mature and develop as a democracy. But aberrations can be costly, as you know, Mr. Speaker. Costly in so many ways. But I recognize that this perceived lack of real differences between these established parties that some of us use to justify the creation of new political formations or new political parties to resonate in some quarters. But when you really analyze it, quite often these individuals who make those statements, profess those statements, have a history themselves. They sometimes are unable to secure some benefit or advantage from one or both political parties, and so become disgruntled and dismissive. And it then becomes easier to paint all politicians with the same brush. Those who argue that both political parties are the same cite several reasons, and perhaps we can dwell on some. They say both parties have a common foreign policy. Never mind nuances in policy stances or differences of emphasis. But we should know that's not the case. Whereas a Labour Party once championed the existence of Cuba, the other party at one time repudiated Cuba's existence. Whereas the Labour Party says that there ought not to be no interference in what is taking place in Venezuela, the other party says that there is just cause, just reason for interference, armed or otherwise. They say both parties are more interested and more supportive of foreign investors. And they claim they do not support locals and local investment. You hear that all the time. Then, not exhausted, they turn to crime and say, look at them, none of them can solve crimes. None of them can deal with the problem of crime. Never mind what they say. Crime continues unabated. But we shall see what the outcome is in this cycle of Parliament. And then they also tell you that both political parties have similar outlooks, and both are at the center of the ideological spectrum. In other words, that both enjoy the same position, save that there are differences in emphasis on some matters. And then they come to perhaps the crowning argument. They say politicians of both parties are in it for themselves and not the people. Both of them are there to enrich their pockets and to see how much money they could make. But I've always maintained, and I'll say it again, if there are politicians who leave politics, retire from politics, and they have money in their bank account, something is wrong. Something has to be wrong. And I will tell you this, Mr. Speaker, I have never had to work as hard as I am now working in my life. I never thought, Mr. Speaker, after all these years serving this country and being a member of Parliament, I would get a salary of $6,500, and there are senior civil servants, including senior secretaries, earning $6,000 plus. What I earn as a parliamentarian, and I'm supposed, Mr. Speaker, from $6,500 to spend for my constituency, even though I receive great assistance these days from the use of state resources. But that's the reality. But they say we're in it for ourselves, to enrich ourselves up and fill our pockets. I want on this occasion, in my reply to this budget, to address the notion that the two political parties represented in this House are one and the same in ideology, policy, or style. I want to do so by painting a general brush and looking at successive budget policies over time, but only by extracting little elements along the way, because you have granted me an hour, and an hour really is no time for such exegesis. An exegesis like this, Mr. Speaker, will take far longer. It will require far more clinical assessment. Well, I am on record as speaking in this House for 6 hours to deliver a budget, and more appropriately, I think we need to speak of breaking that record, which, of course, you will understand takes me beyond 5 hours. There are many in this region who emulate that record, but somehow they fall short. So, Mr. Speaker, I will start by briefly looking at the history of how labor administrations have responded to the needs of our people over time. And as I proceed, I will make the contrast from time to time. Mr. Speaker, my opening caveat is simple. There can be no doubt that labor governments have always sought to address the burning problems of our people, our economy and society. This government, Mr. Speaker, is no exception. Putting people first is its mantra. It is not just a slogan, but an article of faith. It is a statement by which they wish to be tested and by which they wish to be judged. But I offer an inflection, and it is that labor governments have always been people-oriented and people-centered, always, from its creation from the days of George Charles to this day. It is an article of faith of what constitutes a Labour Party in this country. Just for a moment, Mr. Speaker, consider the following policies of the former Labour government, which this government has continued. Unless you think I am meandering, Mr. Speaker, I'm on a frolic of my own, you are welcome to take a look at the Prime Minister's Minister of Finance budget address, where some of those things are repeated and reproduced in this budget statement. Consider the introduction of the policy of a laptop for every secondary student. Consider, too, the grant of an annual amount of $500 to parents whose children have been admitted to secondary schools. Consider, too, Mr. Speaker, the introduction of a program of care for the elderly, often described as a caregivers program, a program that touches the hearts and minds of the elderly in our society. Consider PROUD, a program that allowed St. Lucians who occupied government lands to own the lands that they occupied, and the dramatic changes that this program has brought to the lives of the people of our country. Consider, too, as much as I admire the work that is being done in housing, but the Minister of Housing was no pioneer. The former Labour government introduced a housing repair program for the elderly and dispossessed. They are now learning from that experience. And, Mr. Speaker, the language about addressing poverty is now heard frequently. I ask you to consider, Mr. Speaker, that it was a former Labour government that mounted an assault on poverty reduction through the creation of the Poverty Reduction Fund, which was later transformed on the advice of the Caribbean Development Bank by the successor UWP administration to SSDF. But it was a Labour government that for the first time in the history of this country introduced a focused program to deal with the issue of poverty which we had inherited in this country. And then the much derided STEP program. The Labour Party said that, look, we have thousands of people in our midst who did not have an opportunity to acquire education, to learn skills. They are unemployable. Nobody wants to employ them. But there's about in our communities dispossessed, living on the margins, unable to fend themselves. We created a program called STEP to address their needs. And every time the other party came into office, they interfered with it and sought to dismantle it. Every single time. You want me to use the term disfigure? Disfigure might be a better term. But you know, Mr. Speaker, when the annals of the history of Labour administrations will be published, the generosity of the current government will be held to be unprecedented. Mr. Speaker, it has built on the foundation it inherited from the previous SLP administration, which, as I said, I once had the honor to lead. There is, therefore, a historical code, an umbilical connection between this government and the former SLP administration, going way back to the Labour government under the stewardship of Sir George Frederick Charles, philosophically and otherwise. Now, consider some of the policies of this administration to put things in context. And I'm quoting, of course, from the budget presentation. This administration compensated former workers of Majestic after 25 or more years. Unprecedented. Paid redundancy to terminated LEAT workers. Again, unprecedented. Granted one-off payments to pensioners. Another one-off payment of $600 will be made in November this year. Again, and I ask you to look at the budget speech, page 68, if you doubt me. Item number 23, again, unprecedented. Payment of CXC fees of students. And we note that the government assistance will now increase to 4 subjects per year. But look at the budget speech. Page 66, number 11. Payment to pensioners to be adjusted in line with the government, with the consumer price index. Whether this is wise or not, we'll find out. But look, Mr. Speaker, but at the budget speech, page 68, no, number 24. Granted public officers a 14% wage increase. Granted public servants a one-time bonus of $500 last Christmas. Mind you, it was not the first time that a bonus was paid to public officers, because under the former Labour administration, targets were set for the Customs Department, and then once they met those targets, then a Labour administration paid a bonus which is enjoyed across the board. The concept is not new, but it is certainly welcome. Again, we'll see how that develops. Increase government's minimum pension to $725 per month. Look at the budget speech, page 5, number 8. Again, unprecedented, unparalleled. Awarded over 1,105 grants and loans to young persons start businesses. Budget speech again. At page 56, number 2. Unprecedented. Established the MSME loan grant facility of $10 million. Budget speech at page 4. Look at item number 3. Again, significant. And then perhaps, to crown it, introduction of tuition support to persons wishing to do nursing, ostensibly to assist with the supply of nurses. The budget speech, page 67, number 13. Unprecedented, unheard of, untold. But here is my point, Mr. Speaker. And I know that you have not grasped it because I have not honed it the way that I want to. But this is my point. The fact is, on nearly every single occasion that the power of the state has had to be used to assist the working class, the poor, the marginalized, and the elderly in our midst, it has been and always been a Labour administration that has had to do it. That's the point, Mr. Speaker. That is the point, Mr. Speaker. That is the point. That is the crux of it. Always been a Labour administration, and that is what I mean by this umbilical cord, this continuity, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance, to his credit, made the point well when he said that, quote, history will show that it is the St. Lucia Labour Party that has modernized labour laws, initiated equal pay for equal work, advocated for occupational health and safety, enacted a labour code, and most recently implemented a minimum wage, unquote. I ask you, Mr. Speaker, to confirm by turning to the budget address at page 59. Eloquent words. if I have a complaint about those words, it is that everything that the Minister of Finance said before he touched the minimum wage, all of these things were done by a former Labour administration, which of course this government utilized for good reason. The stage was clearly set. And the adjustment of labor relations in this country could only have taken place because of that inherited legal infrastructure. And to this, Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat myself, and I want to add the following initiatives. It was the Labour administration that mounted the first concerted assault on poverty by creating the Poverty Reduction Fund. It was the Labour administration that ended the shift system in our schools and brought universal secondary education to our parents and to our students. It was the Labour administration that began the task of modernizing our social infrastructure by building a modern corrections facility, investing in new police stations and fire stations, and designing and financing the construction of a modern hospital, the OKEU hospital. I'm coming to that. You just relax. It was relaxed. Just relax. It was a Labour administration that finally ushered access to ownership of land by creating Proud. It was a Labour administration that came to the rescue of the elderly in our midst by creating a caregivers program. It was a Labour administration that constructed modern sports infrastructure. I refer to the Darren Sammy Cricket Ground and of course the George Odlum Stadium in the south. Now again it will be a Labour administration to enhance our sporting infrastructure by constructing an Olympic-sized swimming pool for our people, albeit in the north, but I assume sometime soon in the south there will have to be an extension. And those who believe that if my political career comes to an end at my choice, when I hang my hat, somehow you'll find a Kenny Anthony who retires to his house and remain quiet and say nothing. They're making a big mistake because you see this voice of mine? It will speak clearly and loudly when it has to, particularly in defense of the people of VFR South. Understand that. So the deal was that you build an Olympic-sized swimming pool in the north, but you provide a swimming pool to the south because eventually your best swimmers are going to come from the south. That's where the talent lies. That's where the talent lies. And Mr. Speaker, the member for Castries South is right. We are the administration that pioneered assistance to the poor when we created the James Belgrave Fund. These are examples, Mr. Speaker. It was also a Labour administration that ended the exclusive license of cable and wireless, much to the chagrin of some, and brought liberalization to our telecommunications sector. You walk around with two phones as I do, Mr. Speaker, but understand where it came from. Understand where it came from. You see, all the talk about developing services and providing access to telecommunications, it came from a decision of a Labour government that had the courage to insist on the termination of the license of cable and wireless. That's where it came from. And it's convenient now. We forget history. We forget it. Mr. Speaker, I could go on, but I rest. I rest, Mr. Speaker. Not even, and I say this to my friend next to me, and I will touch him tenderly as I say it, not even the banana industry, the UWP could claim, not even that. For it was a Labour Party that had the foresight to transition away from sugar to bananas. And understand that the facts of history cannot be wished away. Understand that. And Mr. Speaker, herein lies a key, a fundamental difference between the SLP and the United Workers' Party. This administration believes in putting people first. I've said so. It therefore employs the resources of the state to benefit the people of this country. It does not plunder the surpluses of the state. It does not misuse or waste the resources of the state. And don't invite me to digress, because then if you do that, you'll open doors and I can talk about waste. It does not divert the surpluses of the state to benefit a select few. It believes that when things are good, people should share in the bounty. In politics, Mr. Speaker, the fundamental question for any political party when it is elected to office is this: what do you do with the state? That's the fundamental question. The state is now in your command, your direction, and your control. What do you do with the state? That is the fundamental question that faces every political party that accedes to political office. And I wanted to put it a little differently in the context of this budget debate, Mr. Speaker. So, put differently, the question becomes this: to whose benefit do you use the surpluses of the state? The St. Lucia Labour Party administration says that these resources, when they become available, should be used to benefit the people of the country, especially the workers, the poor, and the marginalized. The United Workers' Party believes that the rich, well-off, the established must first be made more rich, rich again, before any benefits can go to the poor or to the workers or to small people. They call it trickle-down economics. You remember that? In classic economic terms, the UWP is a right-wing political party that believes in unvarnished capitalism. Philosophically, the St. Lucia Labour Party believes that the surplus generated by the state has to be shared with its citizens to ensure justice, fairness, and equity. In effect, it believes in a welfare state. And for all practical purposes, we have become a fully fledged welfare state. And this is not a badge or label of shame or dishonor. It is not, and must not be treated as such, as if you do not like or you're afraid to use the term. That's the reality we are in. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I will have you know, and I suspect you know that, the happiest countries of the world today have been identified as the Nordic countries, namely Sweden, Finland, Scandinavia, and Norway. Recent assessments of the happiness index have indicated that these countries occupy the preeminent positions, not the mighty United States or the declining United Kingdom or the barely surviving France. Not these countries. It is the Nordic countries. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because these countries believe in a welfare state, believe that the resources of the state should be shared with their citizens fairly, justly, and in accordance with their needs. If I have one worry, Mr. Speaker, it is our ability to sustain it. And I say, in the spirit of my delivery, we simply cannot maintain our life by constant borrowing. As confirmed in the Economic and Social Review for 2024 and echoed by the Minister of Finance at page 10 in his presentation, the public debt ratio currently stands at 73.5% of GDP in December 2024 from 73.9% at the end of December 2023. It is vital, absolutely vital, that we maintain the downwards trajectory of our debt to GDP ratio. And it is vital that we build on the successes of the fiscal policies and do not endanger the fiscal outcomes that we have had this and the previous year. But this is a good opportunity, Mr. Speaker, for me to segue just a little bit. And I do so sometimes because I'm mindful, that there are a lot of people who don't understand what the past is and who disown it and pretend the past don't exist. That's what they do. And it's everywhere, Mr. Speaker. I was reflecting, Mr. Speaker, this is, 2025? I would have been in politics 28 years, I believe. And it struck me the other day that when I became a candidate for the St. Lucia Labour Party in my constituency, Beaufort South, the kids that were being born after 1997 knew nothing of what Beaufort was like prior to that. They had no consciousness. They didn't understand. They didn't understand what it was like for elderly people to walk through communities in mud with shoes in their hands going to church, 2 pairs of shoes, and what it meant when you arrive in church. You have to put one pair aside that you walked in and then wear another pair to go inside the church. They don't understand. They don't understand the new infrastructure that was constructed in Beaufort South. Mind you, not by people from the north, from Castries or wherever, but by Beaufortians. They don't understand. So, Mr. Speaker, let me segue a little bit. When the people of St. Lucia voted the government which I led out of office in 2016, the debt to GDP ratio was 60.9% of GDP. A mere 0.9% higher than the benchmark set by the central bank. Now, mind you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, these statistics have emerged after the rebasing of the St. Lucian economy. And there's a story behind this rebasing which I don't want to engage in or repeat at this time. But, Mr. Speaker, look at page 131 to see how things develop and what that debt to GDP ratio is like. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at page, I think it is 131. In 2013, the debt to GDP ratio was 62.2%. 2014, 60.7. 2015, 61.5. 2016, 60.9. 2017, 58.9. 2018, 59.4. 2019, 60.4. 2020, 92.5. 2021, 81.9. 2022 revised 69.8. 2023, 73.9. And the forecast for 2024 is 73.5%. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, as I said, it is true that rebasing allowed for some recasting of the figures on the economy to reflect the true strength of the St. Lucian economy. There are those who are ashamed, who don't have the courage to admit that whatever decisions that the Kenny Anthony-led Labour administration took between the period 2011 and 2016, it saved the St. Lucian economy. They're ashamed. They don't want to say it. They pretend that it doesn't exist. But that's the fundamental reality. What they inherited, the United Workers' Party inherited, and what is sustaining us to this day are the results of those changes ushered in by the Kenny Anthony-led Labour administration in that period of time. But they're ashamed to say it. And I know they're ashamed to say it. Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is this. is that we have to tell our citizens frankly, directly, and truthfully that if we want to maintain the quality of life that we have, if we want governments to look after our welfare, to subsidize our way of life, then we have to understand that we have to resolve the issue of financing our needs and our development in a way that is sustainable. This matter of arousing passions over simple tax adjustment needs to end. Because, you see, any and all governments will at some point or the other find it necessary to make tax adjustments of one kind or another because of the surplus that this administration has enjoyed. It has been able to grant concessions over the payment of income taxes, increase the threshold eligibility for income tax. That's the result of all of this. Why quarrel over a 2.5% levy on certain imported items to pay for health care and improve security? Why do you want to quarrel over that? When you yourself, you impose a petroleum tax that significantly increased the cost of fuel. And all of us know that petroleum is always a major source of revenue for governments. Every IMF report warned governments about the revenue intake from petroleum. Mr. Speaker, I well recall the consternation when we legislated VAT. Even though the policy decision to introduce VAT was taken by the United Workers' Party, by Sir John Compton's government. The leader of the opposition will remember well, he was a member of the cabinet that took that decision. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I said VAT was an oppressive tax. I still believe that is the case. I don't apologize for that. I said so because VAT is ruthlessly efficient. Ruthlessly efficient. It spares no one. Everyone, irrespective of their income, pays the identical tax. When the resident of Grosile of Kappa State, and of course, my good friend who is listening to me, I hope she takes no offense because I'm using that as an example because they are far more well off than the poor people of Yvonne South. When you see they go in the supermarket, they are paying the same price as the resident of Bruceville. And I assume Marsha. That's the reality. Everyone, irrespective of their income, pays the identical tax. VAT does not care about your means. When items are zero rated, all obtain the same benefits in equal measure. Yet it is a tax. Yet it is the tax that saved our economy to allow the benefits that we are able to share today. Because this government would not have been able to offer what it has offered to the public if its revenue intake had not grown significantly now that the economy has returned to good health. Mr. Speaker, I am at peace. I am at peace. Mr. Speaker, I know what the Labour administration that I led had the courage to do. I know. And Mr. Speaker, I know that successive governments in this country have benefited immeasurably from those measures taken by the former Labour administration. But Mr. Speaker, one thing I can tell you about the Philippe administration is that this administration listens. He leads a government that listens. I don't mean I agree with him as I will demonstrate in a few minutes, but he listens. It takes humility to listen, painful as it may be sometimes. I know, I have been there. From this budget, Mr. Speaker, I will take two examples, one of which has already attracted some commentary in the press. First is the issue of the life of passports. I remember when it was announced that passports will have to be renewed after 5 years, a hue and cry ensued. The popular comment by citizens was, quote, make it make sense. Oh, by the way, Mr. Speaker, I want some help. I love that phrase, make it make sense. The problem I have is that I have often wondered whether St. Lucians have a copyright in that phrase. Who invented that phrase? I love it. Make it make sense. And there's no phrase that is more powerful than that when it is used, particularly against politicians. Make it make sense. And every time I hear the phrase, make it make sense, I think of those young ladies with all the passion who speak quite often, and they just simply jump up and say, make it make sense. I love to hear the sound and rhythm of those words. But I want somebody to help me, to advise me whether we St. Lucians have a copyright in that phrase. Back then, I too could not understand the decision. And I suspect the Minister of Finance must have heard constant noises from his cabinet colleagues. We have to extend the life of the passport to 10 years. Today, I applaud the decision to increase the life of a passport to 10 years without further charge. The fact is, the government heard our citizens, heard the complaints, and listened. This is what responsive governance is about. This is what it is about. You listen. But the opposition says that the government stole its idea. That's what I've been reading. But on a serious note, since when does the opposition have a monopoly on ideas? No idea is exclusive to any political party. As a matter of fact, who knows? If the then government had listened to what the opposition was telling them, who knows, they might still have been there. My good friend Bradley might be sitting on the other side or in the middle as he sat and watching me tentatively. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. In all sincerity, I want to say this. The opposition should be careful because whether it realizes it or not, by its own acts, rendered by its own acts, rendered irrelevant, odious, and inconsequential. That's the reality of this situation. The second is less attractive but important nevertheless. At page 18 of his budgetary statement, the Minister of Finance stated the following, quote, "We are aware of the concerns in the delay of income tax clearance and national insurance clearance letters." I have a feeling that when the Minister of Finance was writing this, he must have been saying, Lord Almighty, I wonder what the member of your Fourth South is going to say now on this. It then goes on, Mr. Speaker, every effort will be made to encourage these agencies to provide clearance letters in an efficient manner. Unquote, budget speech at page 18, Mr. Speaker. I have been a lone voice in this chamber on this issue. Just like I have been a lone voice about the behavior of banks. Just like I have been a lone voice criticizing the fact that banks are imposing...
Remember, I don't want to silence your voice, but you have 15 minutes left.
15 minutes, Mr. Speaker? What, do you like to hear me? Am I a breath of fresh air to you? You would love to hear me. Okay. I might be a constituent one of these days. Okay.
The member for Castries South is trying to get your attention.
Yes. We shall see. But this is a delicate point now. As I said, Mr. Speaker, I have been a lone voice in this chamber on this issue. But this declaration by the minister means that he has heard me. My question, however, is this enough? Mr. Speaker, I have a problem. And I want you to bear with me. Just be sympathetic and give me a little patience. Give me some patience. I want someone to explain to me, why is it that we have the most degreed public service ever? Everybody now decorated with a degree, either it is from that university, that online university, or that one, all over the place, all kind of online universities, everybody decorated with a degree. Yet, despite the fact that we have a public service that is so degreed, so decorated, we have become lethargic, overly protective, inefficient, and overburdened by rules and regulations. Make that make sense. Explain it to me, Mr. Speaker. Make it make sense that the more you have degreed people in your public service, the worse the service is. Why? Why? But, Mr. Speaker, I want to impress upon the Minister of Finance again that the consequences of satisfying his requirements for clearances are enormous. And let me go over that a few minutes. First of all is a considerable delay in both cases when an application is made to the NIC and to Inland Revenue Department. Then both of them give you a short life for the clearances, 3 months. After 3 months, the clearances expire, so a vendor or purchaser of property has to reapply all over again. And what the Income Tax Department and NIC do is that they look for all kinds of records. They don't understand that those things are vital to the conduct of business in the country. They don't understand that the registration of a deed is a major revenue generating measure, and you cannot frustrate people over these matters. They don't understand that when they take weeks and months to give a clearance, what it has meant for a lot of lawyers and clients is that contracts are vitiated, agreements for sale are vitiated, people lose interest, and quite often clients are the ones who have to bear the cost, because when a contract is vitiated, they often lose their deposits. That is because of the actions of the state. Mr. Speaker, time is of essence for lawyers. The typical attitude in the public service is this: why he or she can't wait? What is the problem with him? Why he more in a hurry than other people? Who is Kenny Anthony to call to ask for his deed to be read and sent back to him for approval? Who is he? You can say that as much as you want, but I have one tool, it's the courthouse. I have one tool, it's the courthouse. Let me give you an example of the consequences. Mr. Speaker, in some instances, conveyances are executed on the strength of letters of administration, and I'm so sorry that my dear friend, the Attorney General, is not here today. I want you to convey to him how deeply distressed I am that he is not here today, although I gave him notice that I would have been here today, because I do have some words, special advice to offer him. So I was saying, Mr. Speaker, people often have to execute conveyances through letters by powers conferred by letters of administration. Quite often, judges may grant an extension of time for a letter of administration, failing which, if the subject of the letters of administration are not resolved, Mr. Speaker, within that time frame, you then have to go back to the court and apply for an extension of time to the letters of administration. So you then go through the whole process again. And the question, the issue is, you have to try to beat the clock imposed by the court. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to the Inland Revenue first. I can understand that the Inland Revenue Department needs to review deeds of sale to ensure that the property values are correct and does not reek of artifice. Because we all know, purchasers and vendors sometimes deliberately undervalue the price of properties so that they can pay less tax. We know that. And so the Inland Revenue Department has to look at the property to determine whether the property has a correct value. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with that. The only issue I have with that is if that deed is on their desk and it stays on their desk for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that's when I have an issue. So this is perfectly understandable. The submission of the deed to verify payment due to revenue gives the department all the opportunity that is needed to intervene if it has an issue. When you submit the deed to the Inland Revenue Department so that you can pay the relevant taxes, the Inland Revenue Department has all the opportunity in the world at that point to make a judgment on the deed that is before it. And if, of course, either the vendor or the purchaser has liabilities, then you engage them. You don't need a letter of clearance. What are you doing with a letter of clearance? In other words, the Inland Revenue Department has tools at its disposal too. It can file a caution, or it can apply for a judicial hypothec on a property. What do you need a clearance for? And I'm disappointed in the National Insurance Corporation. The National Insurance Corporation was created to protect workers, not to burden them, not to burden the citizens of this country, not to engage in oppressive behavior. The NIC, like lawyers, know where to find employers, the records of businesses and evidence of property ownership. They constantly apply for judicial hypothecs against persons who owe the NIC to prevent them from selling their properties without meeting liabilities to the NIC. They already have a remedy. So, Mr. Speaker, I say that the requirement of a clearance is an abuse of the NIC's preeminent position. I say with all sincerity, now that the Minister of Finance has heard me loud and clear, that the time has come to abolish this imposition on citizens and do away with requirements for clearances, both in the case of the NIC and the Inland Revenue Department. Unburden the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you why I miss the Attorney General. I'll tell you why.
Remember, before you tell me that, maybe you might have to apply for a hypothec because you only have 5 minutes left.
Say that again, Mr. Speaker.
You may have to apply for a hypothec because you only have 5 minutes left.
All right, Mr. Speaker. Well, in that event, Mr. Speaker, I will invoke the generosity of an extension of time. I would say, Mr. Speaker, it is now 25 to 4. I have no reason why you shouldn't finish by 4 o'clock, Mr. Speaker. So that's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And may I add, in passing, Mr. Speaker, that the Leader of the Opposition should not take any comfort from my application for an extension of time.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that Standing Order 32.8 be suspended to allow the Honourable Member an extra half hour to complete his presentation.
Honourable Members, the question is that Standing Order 32.8 be suspended and Standing Order 32.10 be invoked to allow the member for Beaufort South an additional 30 minutes in which to complete his presentation. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Please proceed, member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, I was trying to explain to you why I was disappointed, why I'm disappointed that the Attorney General is not here, despite the notice I gave him. But
he did give an excuse that he's attending a matter of the Chief Justice,
Ah, today is the retirement of the acting Chief Justice. I see. I see, Mr. Speaker. Well, that is a reasonable and understandable excuse. Mr. Speaker, my point of departure is a policy announcement by His Excellency the Governor General, and I must tell you that that policy announcement was most welcomed. Mr. Speaker, I am not here debating the merits or demerits of the announcement. All I am doing is to indicate that there was a policy, or so I'm not breaching any standing orders. All I'm doing is to indicate that a policy announcement was made, which in effect is a policy announcement of the government of St. Lucia. And this is what His Excellency said, Mr. Speaker, at page 24. Quote, Madam President, Mr. Speaker, amendments to the Administration of Small Succession Act, Cap 412, needs to be updated to reflect current realities. The proposed change is to allow the Registrar of the High Court to be responsible for letters of administration where the value of succession does not exceed $25,000. Currently, the amount is $5,000. So the change really is to increase the jurisdictional threshold from $5,000 to $25,000. Of course, there might be those who would argue that it should go up, but really, that's not my thrust. That's not my thrust. I want to urge the Attorney General to be strong and imaginative and revisit the entire question of the application for letters of administration. I do not know of any legal obligation that is being abused by banks and the public service as requirements for letters of administration. Now they use it all the time to frustrate the poor people in this country, the workers in this country. And I will explain, lest you believe that I am being ungenerous and unkind. I repeat what I said. It's a good step, but it's not enough. There are some cases where letters of administration are simply not required. It is fashionable now for public officers and banks to seek refuge and insist on letters of administration for simple requests where evidence is overwhelming. We put poor people through unimaginable pain and distress. Let me quote two examples, Mr. Speaker. And this is frequent. All the politicians there should have experienced it. Mr. Speaker, somebody dies in your constituency. The deceased family is looking for funds to bury the person. They find out that that person has a bank account with $3,000 or $5,000. They come to you and ask you if they can get access to the $3,000, $5,000. And inevitably you say to them, you can try, go to the bank to see if the bank will. And you know what the bank probably tells them? We can't touch it. You have to go and get letters of administration. Now I had a joke, Mr. Speaker. To apply for letters of administration will cost anybody anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000, depending on the complexity. So what you are doing, Mr. Speaker, is asking the person to go and get $6,000 to $8,000 to go and pay, Mr. Speaker, a lawyer to get $3,000 out of the bank. That makes sense. Make it make sense, Mr. Speaker. That makes sense? Make it make sense. The honorable member for Swazelle Solivas tells me there's a threshold. Threshold. That's not the point, Mr. Speaker. When these policies are put in the hands of young tellers, they don't know how to apply those policies. Mr. Speaker, this has to be brought to an end. Why would you need letters of administration if a deceased member of the family could be identified and there are means by which, if there's money in a bank, that it can be channeled, for example, to a funeral home to meet the cost of a burial so that it does not go in the pocket? Why? Why you need to put somebody through this to get letters of administration? And Mr. Speaker, another common one is the issue of crown lands, proud lands. Another one, I am replete with a problem now in Vieux-Fort South, Mr. Speaker. Replete with a problem. I don't even know where to turn. Because of the uncooperative behavior of Proud. We didn't create Proud to be engaging in that kind of behavior. Somebody dies on property, crown property that they have occupied over the years. Before their deaths, there was a family member living with them, Mr. Speaker, looking after them, looking after their needs, Mr. Speaker. And the issue then becomes whether the interest with that deceased family member could be transferred to the family member who, for all intents and purposes, inherited the, remained, sorry, Mr. Speaker, on the property. All this requires is an evaluation of the evidence to determine whether the interest should be passed on. Why do you want to compel these persons to go and employ a lawyer to make a simple decision based on the evidence before you to go and get letters of administration, mind you, to determine where an interest should reside? And I had a recent example with a vehicle, Mr. Speaker, I want to share with you to understand the depth of the plight that people face. And I just want, I'm not criticizing the Ministry of Infrastructure or the Department of Transport, because I can see they had issues they needed. I'll tell you this, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, a gentleman falls severely ill. He's married. He is so ill, Mr. Speaker, so ill that he is in problems to pay for his medical costs. The only thing he has is a vehicle. He decides to sell his vehicle, Mr. Speaker. He decides to sell it. His best friend decides to buy the vehicle from him. And he decides to sell the vehicle for $20,000. He says to his best friend, all I want is that you give me $10,000 right away so I can pay for my medical bills, and we'll settle the $10,000 after. But when we settle, you can collect the van. The friend agrees, pays down $10,000. There's evidence that the friend paid down $10,000. But the only thing was that there wasn't a receipt to evidence the payment of the $10,000. The man is too ill to offer a receipt, to sign a receipt. Days later, the gentleman dies. The wife now comes to the gentleman and says, look, I don't have money to bury my husband. Can you give me the $10,000 left on the van so that I can bury my husband? He's a family friend. He agrees. He hands over the $10,000. Mr. Speaker, the poor lady now don't know where to turn. She goes to a JP, who unfortunately gives her the wrong advice regarding what should happen, prepares statutory declarations that are factually incorrect. And of course, when that reaches the transport department, then they say, no, we're not transferring no vehicle, notwithstanding the argument that, look, there was a completed contract. All the ingredients of a contract existed. Offer acceptance consideration. Everything is there. And the department is perhaps suggesting that they should go to and get letters of administration. What are you doing with letters of administration in the context of those facts? The fact of the matter is this. If when you decide to act without letters of administration, if any recipient of the benefits abuse or misuse, there's always a remedy in the court against that individual. That is why, Mr. Speaker, I wanted the Attorney General to be there to say to him, use this opportunity to radically review the regime governing the issuance of letters of administration. Now he says they're going to give the registrar more authority, more power. All well and good, but it is necessary to evaluate whether the registrar has sufficient resources in his department to exercise his jurisdiction efficiently and without delay. We simply cannot cause more frustration. Mr. Speaker, mindful of your time constraints, I am going to touch 4 mundane issues relating to my constituency. I'll be very briefly. And Mr. Speaker, let me say I mean no harm to any minister who's there. I mean no harm. You know, Mr. Speaker, I believe that my experience as a backbencher will be helpful in determining how future backbenchers should be handled or should be treated. I believe so. And that is why I think it is a learning experience for all of us. It's not often that you get ex-prime ministers as backbenchers. It's not often that you get somebody representing a proud constituency like the constituency of Vieux South. It's not often you get somebody who's represented a constituency that has suffered grave injury, grave discrimination in the past. It's not often. So I will deal with these, what I call four mundane issues. And I describe them as mundane to de-emphasize their significance. First, the Minister of Finance noted that the government has also commenced the Tourism Rangers program, with 58 of them having taken the oath. I want to refer to his budget address at page 39. I welcome the arrival of the Minister of Tourism and also the reinstatement of this program. First initiated, Mr. Speaker, by the former Labour government when the current Prime Minister was Minister of Tourism. You see this continuity of which I speak? The wisdom of the past informs the ages, informs the future, provides opportunities and guidance. While I was aware that the program would have been reinstated, I was not aware it had been operationalized and wonder whether any rangers would be appointed in Vieux South. No one has contacted me. Perhaps the Minister of Tourism, in his reply, will have good news for me. And I know he has some subject matters that relating to Vieux that he wants to talk about. This is his opportunity. Secondly, and this perhaps is most sensitive, I cannot find the right words, Mr. Speaker. But I believe there are two people here who will understand me well. I believe the Minister of Commerce will understand me. I believe the Minister of Finance and Prime Minister will understand me. Maybe the member for Labrie will understand me. Maybe. The Minister of Finance announced that, quote, Invest St. Lucia will undertake the construction of a 7-story commercial building for many of the agencies on the brand St. Lucia label in Point Serapis and Castries this year. I want to refer you to the budget address at page 41. Admittedly, the announcement is short on details, understandably. But when I think of such a significant development, I keep on wondering why. After all these years, that Invest St. Lucia benefits by selling the lands of the Vieux Fort community, that not a single investment has been made by Invest St. Lucia except save and expect one lonely, Mr. Speaker, bus stand opposite the Vieux Fort Senior Secondary School. That is all they have done in Vieux Fort South, a bus stand. And they're selling the lands left, right, and center. Mr. Speaker, when the new board came into office on the accession of this government, they promised that they would have built some kiosks at the entrance of Vieux Fort at the top of Clark Street to beautify Clark Street. They even spoke about the possibility of building a roundabout. I have been begging for a roundabout for years to beautify Vieux Fort, to give Vieux Fort some spirit, some character, some presence for years. The Prime Minister will remember we have spoken about roundabouts during his tenure, in Vieux Fort. But after making the promise, lo and behold, they pulled the rug. They said they're not doing that anymore. They never gave me a reason, Mr. Speaker. That's Invest St. Lucia for you, Mr. Speaker. I am not going to say no more because this is such a charged matter that the few words I have left, I think, will be contaminated by what I have just said. So I have to withdraw and pull away. But that's Invest St. Lucia. And you see, the member for Soufriere is smiling and laughing because she knows and remembers my battles, even with her, because she's protected what invested Lucia was doing. Protected it. But I have a feeling now she has reflected and that she has understood the error of her ways. She's understood. But I see she's taking inspiration from the first South. They say they're going to start an administrative center for her come July. Mine has languished since 2016, but she's getting an administrator. I'm so happy for the people of Beaufort, for the people of Soufrière. I'm happy. I want to go down there and celebrate with you. Record time. Record time. But I'm happy. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, and I'm talking on mundane issues, the Minister of Finance has announced that SLASPA has been prepared a project for the restoration of the lighthouse at Moula Sheikh with a view of converting it into a modern tourism attraction, and stakeholder consultations are ongoing. I say hooray! I welcome this initiative. I remember raising this issue some time ago and suggested that this site had too much potential to allow it to stay unused and idle, and I even criticized something I don't normally do at all. I even criticize the National Trust for holding back potential investments in that area. And I was roundly upbraided by some who said to me, it sounds like my utterings were inconsistent with the outlook of the government where the trust was concerned. I love that trust dearly. I protect it. I love the fact that they protecting the patrimony. But you can't hinder development. So I welcome this initiative. Such an investment, I believe, has huge possibilities if it is done right. I still believe it's an incredible site for a unique, if I may add, in my latter years, Mr. Speaker, a romantic restaurant. I have time for a romantic restaurant, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why some of you believe age suddenly eclipses interest in such matters. My interest is alive and well. I would love to have a romantic dinner at the top of Moula Sheikh. I don't know if it will materialize, but you know, here comes the disappointment, Mr. Speaker. The minister says consultations are ongoing. Curiously, though, I have not been consulted by SLASPA on its proposed plans. I guess I am nothing more than a stakeholder. Lo and behold, people, I'm a stakeholder. I'm not a parliamentary representative. I fall under the agenda of stakeholders. That's who I am, Mr. Speaker. And fourthly, Mr. Speaker, and lastly in my mundane matters before I come to closure, the Minister of Finance advised that the government will continue discussions with the Roman Catholic Church with a view to rationalizing church-owned lands. Again, I invite you to turn to the budget address at page 63. This again is welcome news, Mr. Speaker. I have always maintained that the people of Beaufort need to own their community. They do not. They do not. To the minister's statement, because I believe it was just a minor omission, I should add that discussions are also on the way with the Anglican Church in respect of the lands owned by that church, and a proposal will be submitted to the Minister of Finance within the next few weeks. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I turn to the initiatives announced by the Minister of Finance for Beaufort South at pages 62 to 63 of the budget statement. I am aware that it is unusual, unprecedented for a constituency to be identified and given special treatment. I give thanks and praise to the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister. It is true that a constituency may be highlighted when special projects or when a special project is planned for that constituency. So, you may want to provide context. But even before, but never before rather, has a constituency been singled out in such detail as happened here. And I compliment the minister, and I have absolutely no doubt that his colleagues would have supported that section of the budget. I believe above all else that my constituents will welcome the clarity with which the Minister of Finance has spoken. I know that the residents of Cedar Heights will be relieved once again, but this time I want to advise the Minister of Infrastructure that they will be keeping a very close eye and watching closely the timing for the construction of these roads. I can single out every individual project for elaborate treatment, but time does not allow. Suffice
Which
it
reminds
to
me, member,
say-
you have 15 minutes left.
Oh, 15. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I was misled. Suffice it to say, Mr. Speaker, that I am excited by the intended construction of the boardwalk along the Vieux-Fort seafront. I believe that this project will breathe new life, energy, and investment to the town center. Mr. Speaker, you may ask me why my confidence, why my faith, despite my disappointments over the past years. I'll tell you. I'll give an example. For me, it is particularly pleasing that the Minister of Finance indicated that the rehabilitation of the Bruceville Main Road will commence next month. I believe the Minister of Finance meant May. We're in April, so next month will be May. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the rehabilitation started before the budget statement was delivered. I say, where to go, Mr. Prime Minister? You can say you'll start after when you deliver your statement, but in fact the project has started before you delivered your statement. Where to go, Mr. Minister of Finance? That is the example to follow and to emulate. Don't follow the logic of the former member for Castries Central, Sir George Mallet, who said as we speak construction is on the way for modern prison, and everybody go to the site next day to see if they see any construction. All they see is a set of trees and snakes darting from one end to the next. I don't know if that episode is remembered. But that is the way to go. Make your announcement, but you know the project has started. And that is what Vieux-Fort Stout is expecting. So the timelines which the Honourable Member mentioned will be followed very closely, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I conclude by this observation. When I go through the list of initiatives presented in this budget, I can well understand the dismay and frustration of the leader of the opposition. It is reported, and he's sitting next to me not far away, and he can confirm or deny, that he said as follows, quote, "When I look at these nice things, what am I debating?" Unquote. Now that is an extraordinary admission. My hope for him is that his party does not call for his head on such a glaring error. And that is the problem when you see you don't rehearse what you're going to say in advance. Now, if you watch me, Mr. Speaker, I never give interviews at the front of Parliament. Never, ever. Ever. Never. I stopped it years ago because I know the dangers. That is where ministers speak the most nonsense, at the entrance of Parliament, because they then say things they're not supposed to say, Mr. Speaker. As I said, it is for the Honourable Member to disclose whether he said or did not say. And, Mr. Speaker, of course, he can come back, and depending on what theatre unfolds this afternoon, he can come back and say, this is the context in which I made the statement. But what I wish to tell him is that when he uttered these words, there was precedent to support him. I remember many years ago that after I delivered a budget, I think it was 1998, Louis George was then the leader of the opposition and the lone member of the opposition, uttered in his reply, it's on record, quote, Labour Debo, unquote. In those years, that was the choice phrase of St. Lucians, Labour Debo. You see why, Mr. Speaker, I'm in love. I'm enamored with the language of St. Lucians and the passion of St. Lucians and the way they say things. Make that make sense. Labour Debo. It has a rhythm. It has a cadence, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure. Huh? Yes, of course, we need a romantic. And don't forget that you're not past the age where you need a romantic dinner. You're not past that age. And you must have a romantic dinner with all the trappings. Truth be told, Mr. Speaker, and I end, my advice to the leader of the opposition is this. The leader of the opposition should be guided by the president of Louis George and give up the ghost. Mr. Speaker, I thank you. I thank you.